This is Chapter 4, Section 4. It's Learning Plan 2.9. We're going to use the matrix method. What is a matrix? It's an ordered array of numbers. The numbers are called the elements of the matrix. The matrices are controlled by which row. So here's an element. They are controlled by which row and which column they contain. So the number of rows, which in this case is 2, times the number of columns are the dimensions of the matrix. So here's a 2 by 2 matrix, a 4 by 3 matrix. Any matrix in which there's the same number of rows as columns is a square matrix. So an augmented matrix is what we're going to talk about next. Notice 1, negative 1, 1, negative 3, and 1, 2, 1, negative 5. So we augment it by putting this line in there. We can exchange rows in a matrix. We can multiply rows and we can add rows together. So here's one thing that we did is we switched the first and the third rows around to get the second matrix there. Another thing we can do is we can multiply a row. Notice 2 times 3, 3 times 3, 9 times 3. And the third thing we can do is we can multiply and add. So we multiplied this row by 3 and added it to the top row. I'm sorry, by 2, negative 2, and added it to the top row. Why would we do that? Because we want to end up with a row echelon form in which the diagonals are 1, below the diagonals are all zeros. So in this case, we have 1, negative 2, 9, 3, 1, 13. Our first row already has a 1 in it, so we're going to leave the first row the way it is and multiply the first row. I'm going to change colors here, by negative 3 and adding it to the second row. 3 times negative 3, negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, add 3 is 0. Negative 3 times negative 2 is negative 6, add 1 is positive, negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6, add 1 is positive 7. Negative 3 times 9 is negative 27, add 13 is negative 14. Now we're going to multiply this row by 1/7, so that the first row is 1, negative 2, 9. The second row is 0, 1, negative 2. So y is negative 2. If we substitute that into the first equation, 1 minus negative 2 times 2 times negative 2, excuse me. 1 minus negative 2 times 2, it's positive 2, is 9. Negative, negative makes positive, so 1 plus x, this is supposed to be x. X plus 4 is 9. Subtract 4 from each side. X is 5. So our solution is negative 2, 5. You do this one. So we get 1, 3, 3, 2, negative 3, negative 12. Our first one already has a 1 in the first spot, so let's leave it the way it is. If we multiply the first one by negative 2 and add it to the second one, I'm going to change colors here, we get negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, add 2 is 0. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, minus 3 more is negative 9. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, minus 12 is negative 18. Now we're going to multiply the second row by negative 1/9. Leave the first row alone. The second row becomes 0, 1, 2. So y is 2. Now let's substitute that into the first equation. 1 plus 3 times 2 equals 3. 1, that's supposed to be x. X plus 6 is 3. Subtract 6 from both sides. We get x equals negative 3. Okay, how about this one? This one's kind of interesting when you solve it using it. We have 1, 1, negative 9, 1, negative 1, 19. First row already has a 1 in the first spot. Now let's multiply the first row by negative 1 and add it to the second row. I'm going to change colors here. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Add 1 is 0. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Minus 1 more is negative 2. Negative negative 9 makes positive 9. Plus 19 is 28. So multiply the second, or divide the second row by negative 2. And you get 0, 1, negative 14. Top row is 1, 1, negative 9. So y equals negative 14. Substitute that into the first equation. X minus 14 is negative 9. Add 14 to both sides. X is 5. All right. So we can do the same thing with 3 equations. It's just a little bit tougher to get it into row echelon form. The first thing I'm going to do is this already has a 1 coefficient, so I'm going to write that row first. 1, negative 3, negative 1, 7. I'm going to write the second row as this one, negative 1, 1, negative 5, negative 9, and write this one last, 2, negative 1, 1, 7. I got the first row with a 1 in the first spot, negative 3, negative 1, 7. I'm going to multiply it by, I'm just going to add it to the second row. This and this makes 0. This and this makes negative 2. This and this makes negative 6. This and this makes negative 2. Now I'm going to multiply the first row by negative 2 and add it to the last row. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Add 2 is 0. Negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6. Minus 1 is positive 5. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. Plus 1 is 3. Negative 2 times 7 is negative 14. Plus 7 is negative 7. Okay, now I'm going to multiply the second row by negative 1/2, or in other words, divide each of these by 2. So my first row is still 1, negative 3, negative 1, 7. My second row becomes 0, 1, 3, 1. And then my third row, I'm going to change colors here, is going to be multiply this row by negative 5 and add it to the last row. 0 times negative 5 plus 0 is 0. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5. Add 5 is 0. Negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. Add 3 is negative 12. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5 minus 7 is negative 12. Now I'm going to multiply the last equation by 1 negative 1/12, or in other words, divide this row by negative 12. And my first row, 1, negative 3, negative 1, 7. My second row, 0, 1, 3, 1. My third row, 0, 0, 1, 1. So Z is 1. Substitute that into this second row. If this is 1, then we have y plus 3 equals 1. Or in other words, subtract 3 from both sides. We get y equals negative 2. So now we can substitute these two into the first row. We have x minus 3 times negative 2 is plus 6. Minus 1 times 1, so it's minus 1 equals 7. So we have, I gotta make sure I got this right. Yep. So we have 6 minus 1 is 5. Subtract 5 from both sides, we get x is 2. So our answer is 2, negative 2, 1. Do the same thing with this matrix. When you're ready, press play and I'll show you how I did it. So we have 1, 1, negative 2, negative 5. Second row, negative 1, 2, 1, negative 1. Third row, 2, negative 1, 3, 14. The first row is good. Let's just add the second row to it. So we have 1, 1, negative 2, negative 5. 1 and negative 1 is 0. 1 and 2 is 3. Negative 2 and 1 is negative 1. Negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6. Let's multiply the top row by negative 2 and add it to the last row. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Add 2 is 0. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2 minus 1 more is negative 3. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. Add 3 is positive 7. Negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10. Add 14 is 24. So let's try first row is fine. 1, 1, negative 2, negative 5. Let's divide the second row by negative 3. Or I'm sorry, by positive 3. And we get 0. Zero, 1, negative 1/3, negative 2. Let's add these two rows together and get our bottom row. 0, 0, negative 1 and 7 makes 6. Negative 6 and 24 makes positive 18. So Z is 3. Let's substitute that in here. So we would have y, a third of 3 is 1, so minus 1 equals negative 2. Add 1 to both sides. Y is negative 1. and then take that into the first equation right here. X minus 1, negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, equals negative 5. Negative 1 minus 6 is negative 7, so add 7 to both sides. We get x is 2. So our answer is 2, negative 1, 3. Okay, you try this one. Okay, let's put this row first. 1, 3, 6, 72. Let's put this row second. 2, 6, negative 1, 40, and then this row will be third. Negative 8, 1, 1, negative 9. Okay, let's multiply the first row by negative 2 and add it to the second row. Well, let's write down the first row first. 6, 72. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, add 2 is 0. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, add 6 is 0. Negative 6 times 6 is, or negative 2 times 6 is negative 12, and this is negative 144. And then our last row, let's multiply this first row by positive 8. I'm going to change colors so that you can see it. Positive 8. 8 times 1 is 8, minus 8 is 0. 8 times 3 is 24, and 1 is 25. 8 times 6 is 48, and 1 is 49. 8 times 72, oh my, that's a lot. Where's my calculator? 8 times 72 is 576. Subtract 9, and we get 567. Okay, let's multiply this middle row by negative 12, and we get, and make it our last row, 0, 0, 1, 12. So z is worth 12, 0, 25, 49, 567, 1, 3, 6, 72. Z is 12. That's not even one of our choices. We must have made a mistake here. You know, on this one, I wouldn't even solve it using matrices. I would solve it using the method that we learned last time, take the matrix multiplication. As soon as I saw this 72, I knew we were in big trouble. And in this case, look at this. You got to divide this by 25, and you're going to have 49 25ths. That's a lot of work. You can make a lot of mistakes on this one. I would use matrix multiplication. Now, sometimes you get inconsistent or dependent equations. Let's look here. 1, negative 1, 2, negative 2, 2, 2. In this case, the first row is 1, negative 1, 2. If we multiply the first row by 2 and add it to the second row, we get 0. Negative 2 times, or 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, add 2 is 0 again. 2 times 2 is 4, add 2 is 6. So you have 0x plus 0y equals 6. You would have that never happens. So your answer would be the null set. Now you can also get a system of dependent equations. Let's look at this first one. If we multiply the top row by 1/3, we get 1, negative 1/3, 8/3. Second row is negative 6, 2, 4. So let's multiply the first row by 6 and add it to the second row. First of all, let's write down the first row. 1, negative 1/3, 8/3. 6 times 1 is 6, minus 6 is 0. 6 times negative 1/3 is negative 2, add 2 is 0. 6 times 8/3 is 16, add 4 is 20. Notice once again you get that null set. On the second one, 1, 2, 7, negative 1, negative 2, negative 7. You'll notice what happens here. First row is fine, 1, 2, 7. Add the two rows together and you get 0, 0, 0, which 0 is always equal to 0, so we would have many solutions. And in fact, we would have the set x, y such that x plus 2y equals 7. Remember, that's how we're supposed to write those when we get that kind of solution. All right. On this one, we would have 4, negative 1, 3, 12. Let's make our first row this one, though. 1, 4, 6, negative 32. And our last row would be 5, 3, 9, 20. Multiply the first row by negative 4 and add it to the second row. 1, 4, 6, negative 32. Add it to the second row, 0. Negative 4 times 4 is 16, minus 1 is negative 17. Negative 4 times 6 is negative 24, add 3 is negative 21. Negative 4 times negative 32 is positive 128. Multiply the first row by negative 5 and add it to the last row, you get 0. Negative 20 and 3 is negative 17. Negative 30 and 9 is negative 21. Negative or positive 160 minus 20 is 140. No, 180, excuse me. Notice your second two equations are exactly alike here, so you would have 0, 0, 308. 308 doesn't ever equal 0, so we would have the null set.